Tonight, more than 2 weeks after disappearing in Afghanistan, a U.S. soldier appears as a captive on a Taliban video. I'm Russ Mitchell. Also tonight, golfer Tom Watson loses the British Open, but he's still a winner for those who believe you are never too old.
Absolutely beautiful.
On the eve of the moon landing anniversary, a talk with a NASA controller who gave the green light. And remembering Walter Cronkite through the words of the colleagues who knew him best.
Walter kind of smiled after the evening news if you did kind of an amusing piece. I mean, it just made your day.
This is the CBS Evening News with Russ Mitchell.
And good evening. The Pentagon now confirms a U.S. soldier missing for weeks in Afghanistan has been captured by the Taliban. The soldier, Bo Bergdahl, is from Ketchum, Idaho, and was seen last night in a Taliban video posted online. Tonight, the U.S. military is condemning the release of the video as the soldier's family prays for his safe return. Correspondent Mandy Clark has the latest from Kabul.
I'm from Idaho, Haley, Idaho.
In the video, 23-year-old Private First Class Bo Bergdahl appears in good health. Questioned in English by his captors, he says he's being treated like a guest. But in the 28 minutes of footage, he often looks downcast and says he's afraid.
I'm scared I won't be able to go home. It is very unnerving to be a prisoner.
The U.S. military has reacted angrily to the release of the video.
Well, we're very unhappy with the exploitation, public exploitation of a prisoner and the humiliation that goes with that. That's a violation of international law.
While the Taliban has claimed responsibility for the abduction, it is still unclear how the soldier went missing last month. The U.S. military says the incident is still under investigation. In the video, Private Bergdahl states he was lagging behind on patrol. And after more than 2 weeks in captivity, he becomes emotional talking about his family.
I have a very, very good family that I love back home in America. And I miss them every day. That I'm gone, I miss them, and I'm afraid that I might never see them again.
Back home in a written statement, his father Bob Bergdahl says he hopes and prays for his son's safe return. The U.S. military is saying it is doing everything it can to get the soldier back safely, but insists there will be no negotiating with terrorists. Mandy Clark, CBS News, Kabul.
Authorities in San Francisco are investigating the country's latest mass transit accident, a collision between two light rail trains in the city's West Portal district. Ben Tracy tells us what happened.
Some witnesses say it sounded like a bomb went off. Two San Francisco light rail trains collided Saturday afternoon, sending 48 people to the hospital, at least 4 with severe injuries, including the operator of one of the trains.
They need to have this area cleared so paramedics and injured can get through.
The San Francisco Municipal Railway L train rear-ended the K train at a boarding platform. It was 2:30 in the afternoon, both trains packed with Saturday shoppers.
I had to spin out of the way. It saw it coming. It was frightening.
Rescue workers treated some of the wounded on scene, but there were so many they brought in a public bus to transport the rest to the hospital.
Most of the people on board this bus was the one that could be able to walk right now.
The NTSB is investigating the cause of the crash and will consider both mechanical and human causes.
The driver's head was down. He looked like he was asleep or passed out, or couldn't tell, but he was not looking up. He was not slowing down or braking or no signals, nothing. And I knew, you could tell he was not going to stop.
This is the 4th major transit crash in the last year. In Washington, D.C. last month, 9 people were killed when a Metrorail train collided with a stationary one. In Boston, 50 people were injured when a subway operator who was texting plowed into another. And last September in Southern California, 25 people were killed when a commuter train slammed into an oncoming freight train. Ben Tracy, CBS News, Los Angeles.
There is mystery tonight surrounding a terrorism trial of an American citizen that gets underway tomorrow in the United Arab Emirates. The suspect could face the death penalty, but his attorneys claim their client has been detained, interrogated, and prosecuted by officials in the UAE at the behest of the United States. Michelle Miller has that story.
Naji Hamdan is a father of 3 who obtained American citizenship after graduating from college and starting a successful auto parts business in California. Now he awaits trial in the United Arab Emirates as an alleged terrorist, based on a confession he says he made only after weeks of torture.
Beat with boots, shoved on the floor, made to eat dirt.
The 43-year-old Lebanese-born Muslim American says he was blindfolded when he signed the statement his captors had written for him.
He had no idea what he was signing. He had no idea really what he was confessing to. What he did know was that he just wanted the torture to end.
Adding to the mystery, the UAE's charges against Naji Hamdan are vague. He's accused of supporting terrorism and participating in a terrorist group. But the UAE hasn't said which group or what he allegedly did to help. The UAE embassy in Washington told us it would not be appropriate to comment on the case. Hamdan's attorneys from the ACLU claimed the U.S. was behind his arrest, calling it proxy detention. After a foiled plot to bomb LA's airport in 1999 and then 9/11, Hamdan was questioned by FBI counterterrorism agents, but to arrested. He moved his family to the UAE 3 years ago.
The real danger here is that because there isn't any evidence to charge him in U.S. court, someone decided just to have the UAE do it for us.
But the FBI says at no time did it request that the UAE detain or arrest Hamdan. The CIA declined to comment. But in Hamdan's former hometown of Hawthorne, California, his friends are speaking out. Ahmed Azam has known Hamdan for 20 years.
Naji never ever, and I personally swear that he never ever been involved in any activity or there is any sign that he's related to any terrorist activity.
Azam, once president of their local mosque, says Hamdan was very religious, but not radical, and is appealing to the U.S. government to intervene. State Department envoys have visited Hamdan in prison, but won't reveal if they're trying to help him or if they think he's guilty.
Obviously, we're aware of it. We are watching carefully.
If you leave America's shores and you go abroad, our government may go get you there, and neither the courts nor anyone else will stand in to protect you.
Hamdan's trial in the UAE is before a judge and may last only 1 day. If convicted, his attorneys say he faces life in prison or even the death penalty. Michelle Miller, CBS News, New York.
Changing directions now, there is news this evening of an almost historic moment from the world of sports. Only one short putt stood between 59-year-old American Tom Watson and golf history. He was on the verge of becoming the oldest winner of a major championship. Tony Guida has more on a performance that inspired older golfers everywhere.
At 59, Tom Watson was supposed to be too old for this. Yet with a birdie on the 71st hole of the British Open, Watson was young again. Ready to write one of the greatest stories in the history of sport. Weekend golfers everywhere rejoice.
Thrilled that he's doing as well as he is because he's a year older than me.
They've been playing golf at Van Cortlandt Park in the Bronx since 1895. It is the oldest public course in the country. Even duffers here have a respect for the game that borders on reverence when they talk about what an aging champion is doing across the pond.
It shows tremendous skill, character, determination, and it's truly inspiring and motivating for every golfer.
Paul Sleva, the pro at Van Cortlandt, says Watson played Turnberry with an almost incomprehensible mixture of flair and grit, a perfect marriage of golfer and course.
Tom Watson is probably the greatest links player of all time. And on a links course, you have to hit so many different shots and then accept the outcome.
5 times before, the outcome for Watson was the Claret Jug, 1975 at Carnoustie, 77 at Turnberry, 1980 Muirfield, 82 at Troon. A year later, Watson's 5th championship at Royal Birkdale. 26 years later, on this Sunday afternoon, Watson stood over an 8-foot putt on the final hole that would seal the unimaginable. For the first time all week, Watson showed his 59-year-old nerves. Was he, in fact, too old for this?
Even if he doesn't win, it's still an incredible achievement.
Weekend golfers will never hit shots like Watson, but they know greatness when they see it. Tony Guida, CBS News, the Bronx, New York.
And coming up on tonight's CBS Evening News, the one small step for man that hinged on one young NASA employee's big decision. You could say President Obama will host some visitors from outer space tomorrow. His guests will be the 3 Apollo 11 astronauts to mark the 40th anniversary of the first landing on the moon. But of course, hundreds of thousands of workers helped get them there, including one whose quick thinking helped make history. Randall Pinkston has his story.
Houston, we see you on the steerable, over.
As Apollo 11 descended to the moon, Stephen Bales was at NASA's Mission Control in Houston, the guidance officer for the historic flight. He was just 26 years old.
I thought if there was going to be a problem, it would happen before we ever started the landing.
But there had not been any major problem since liftoff 3 days earlier, and the lunar module, called Eagle, with astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on board, was now 50,000 feet above its destination.
Everything looked just perfect. I was really excited. I said, this is it.
Suddenly, 5 minutes into the descent, with the Eagle at 6,000 feet, an alarm went off.
1202 alarm.
Armstrong alerted Mission Control, a 1202 alarm. Even the astronauts didn't know what that meant.
1202, what's that?
In Mission Control, Flight Director Gene Kranz turned to Bales for an immediate answer.
1202 alarm meant that the computer wasn't finishing all its tasks that it was assigned to do that second.
The Eagle's computer system was simply overloaded, which could have caused the navigation system to fail, forcing NASA to abort the moon landing.
Everybody's waiting for me now.
It's executive overflow. If it does not occur, then we're fine.
To Bales, everything else looked good. The Eagle's altitude, its speed.
I took 15 seconds to make up my mind. That is an eternity.
With the whole world watching, waiting for man's first touchdown in another world. Whether to continue or not at that crucial moment was up to Bales.
Do you remember how you were feeling at that moment?
I was scared to death. Absolutely scared to death.
This is the reading on the 1202 program alarm.
Then Bales spoke up.
We're going that flight.
I say, flight, we're going at alarm.
Radar flight looks good. Raj. 2,000 feet.
The descent continued. Eagle dropped to 2,000 feet.
We have another 1202 alarm.
But computer program alarms went off 6 more times. Each time Bales gave the green light.
Okay, all flight controllers, gonna go for landing. Retro. Go. Righto. Go.
What are the variables that you're considering when you're trying to decide go or no go?
We've been trained to not sit there and think about things like you can mess this up. We were trained to think about things like how can you make it work.
40 feet down, 2.5. Picking up some dust.
With less than a minute of fuel left, Eagle made its final approach.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
And I was just relieved.
Okay, that looks good there, Neil.
While the world was in awe. The following month, when President Richard Nixon presented the 3 Apollo 11 astronauts with Medals of Freedom, the president also gave out a 4th to Steve Bales as a representative of everyone at Mission Control.
This is the young man when the computers seemed to be confused and when he could have said stop or when he could have said wait, said go.
Well, it really was a technological miracle that we could do that in 1969.
Bales stayed with NASA for 27 more years and now sells chemicals, an earthbound job for a man who helped open a new frontier in space. Randall Pinkston, CBS News, Sewell, New Jersey.
And next up on tonight's CBS Evening News, we'll hear what it was like to work with Walter Cronkite. Tributes to former CBS News anchorman Walter Cronkite have been pouring in all weekend. Some of the most heartfelt come from those who worked alongside him. And here are just a few.
I was totally terrified of Walter Cronkite. I was in my mid-20s. I was new to CBS.
He was demanding, but he was accessible. He was likable. And because of that, you wanted to please him.
This guy was a god. He was the it journalist on television, and my whole thought was just, don't screw it up.
I was the first woman producer on the broadcast, and he was extremely welcoming. As long as you delivered the goods, he didn't care what you were.
If Walter called the Washington Bureau after the evening news for Bob Schieffer or Roger Mudd, I mean, people were nervous. People got scared.
There were things known as WWs, Walter Wants, and you had to go and get those quick.
A Walter Want was very simple. One,
I want to know X, or 2, you've got this fact, but prove to me that it's correct.
If Walter wanted a story, he got it. It was going to be done on his timetable, and it was going to be done to his exacting specifications.
What I learned from Walter Cronkite that I still live with today is his sense of competitiveness. Walter did not like to get beat on anything.
He didn't like losing on the tennis court any more than he liked losing on a news story.
A few weeks after I was there, we were beaten on a story, and Uncle Walter walked into the fishbowl and ripped us apart. How could we miss it? How did we get it wrong? And furthermore, we're going to get it right for the next feed.
I did see him explode one night after a broadcast when there had been a question about whether we had gotten something right about President Nixon, and he just yelled, "We had better get this right."
Before a time of anchors and entourages and celebrity, he was the real deal.
He loved to chat when you'd come back from a story, and he wanted to know more than what you'd been able to put into a 1.5 or a 2-minute piece. And I once talked with one of his executive producers about that, who rolled his eyes and smiled, and he said, "Well, don't you know about Walter?" And I said, "Well, what is there to know?" And he said, "Walter is the world's greatest gossip."
Walter never traveled with any money, it seemed like. So if you took a cab with Walter, you ended up paying for that taxi.
I had been at CBS 6 or 7 years when my father died, and I was in the Washington bureau, and Walter was in the bureau shortly after I had come back to work. And he came up to me, he squeezed my shoulder, he said, "I want to offer you my deepest sympathy, Michael." Well, I was pleased but somewhat taken aback, and I said, "Thank you." And a minute later, I turned to a colleague and I said, "How am I to take that?" And he said, "I think you have to change your name."
Walter kind of smiled after the evening news if you did kind of an amusing piece. I mean, it just made your day. It just made your day.
You knew that he was talking to something like 20 million people a night, but he always spoke to you like you were a human being. Even as a 24-year-old, I was allowed to call him Walter. Everybody called him Walter.
And we'll be back. Finally this evening, a few more Walter Cronkite memories. Almost exactly 9 years ago, I had the honor of interviewing Walter on the 50th anniversary of the start of his CBS News career. Can you believe it's been 50 years since you joined CBS?
Almost impossible. Seems like only yesterday.
Walter Cronkite reporting March 15th.
From day one, he was creating broadcast news as we now know it. In fact, the word anchorman was coined for Walter Cronkite.
It was very primitive. I did not write a script for the broadcast in those days at all.
Really?
I had a blank monitor, big monitor up there, television set, and there'd be 10 in the gate to count down seconds, 10, 9, 8. And I'd time it so I hit the film on time.
But in those early days, things didn't always work out as planned.
We have just had, I've been advised, some film in from the Defense Department. And here it is. This is the Explorer as it is being moved to the gantry. Unfortunately, however, the film seems to be upside down. There's our film now of the preparations right side up.
In a time before the internet and instant news, Walter Cronkite brought the world's triumphs and tragedies into our living rooms every night. One of my first memories in life is November 22nd, 1963, when you announced that President Kennedy had died. Of all the stories you covered, of all the stories you reported, did that one affect you the most?
Yes, with that particular emotion, emotion of deep sadness, yes, very definitely. There were other stories that I was pleased with. The emotion was just the opposite, the bright emotion, man landing on the moon successfully. But certainly, as far as the being deeply touched by a major tragedy, that was it.
I hope this is a fair question, but what are you most proud of in your 50 years at CBS?
Oh, I think probably holding on to my integrity and perhaps passing on a little of that feeling about journalistic standards on to others who came with me and then after me.
Do you have any advice for those of us who would like to someday celebrate our 50th anniversary at CBS News?
Hang in there. Hang in there.
As you can see by the almost constant smile on my face, that was a magical day for me, and Mr. Cronkite was a true gentleman. And that is the CBS Evening News.